Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. How you're feeling? Good. That's good. Welcome to the Rainbow Votes Election Forum. My name is Courtney Act. I am your moderator tonight, which is just a fancy word for a drag queen with a clipboard. I am in this glorious cream suit, so you could be forgiven for thinking that I'm a real journalist. But hopefully the purple Lurex crop top and the 7-inch Louboutins let you know that I am not, in fact, Lee Sales. I have no formal qualification for this role, except that I am a proud member of the LGBTQIA+ community. Thank you. I am a patron of Equality Australia, and I'm also a person standing here wondering who is going to get my vote on May 18. Oh, sorry, that's Eurovision. Who is going to get my vote on May 3? So before we dive into their panellists, I would like to invite to the stage Binawee Bales from the Metropolitan Aboriginal Land Council to do a welcome to country. Mic is not on.
I was going to say, I have a big voice, I can yell. No, I won't do that. Before I begin, I would love to teach you a greeting. It's a greeting in the local language of the Gadigal people. So when I greet you, please do greet me back using the same word. So in our language, we say warami. Can you all say warami? Warami. Beautiful. My name is Binawee. Binawee means richness of the land of Mother Earth in my father's language. My mother's people descend from here, the Eora, Wonnarua and Bundjalung nations of New South Wales. My father's people descend from the Birigaba, Gungaloo, Waka Waka and Woolly Woolly nations from southeast to North Queensland. What does that mean to you? It just means I have a really big family and it goes from Redfern to North Queensland. Anyhow, I'm here today representing the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, and it's an absolute honour to be able to welcome you all to country today. We meet today on the lands of the Gadigal people. Gadigal people identify as saltwater and sandstone people. The totem is Gawara. The totem is the Sangawena, and the dreaming is Gawara. The Gawara means whale. Now, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the many sovereign First Nations from where people are joining online, and I pay my respects to the elders. Not only the elders of this land, I pay my respects to each and every one of your elders as well, because without our elders, we wouldn't be here today. This welcome to country, it's an invitation to walk with First Nations peoples, not only in the spirit of reconciliation, but in the spirit of keeping this ancient culture alive and this country strong so that we can thrive as one people walking the path of reconciliation together. I ask the ancestors whose spirits remain with this land, I ask them for safe passage, to keep each and every one of you safe, but also to look after us and look after our children always. In closing, I'd love to leave you with some wisdom from my grandmother. My grandmother would often say, our actions today determine the kind of ancestor we will be to the children of the future. My grandmother constantly reminded us, she would say, we need to ensure that the future generations have the inherent rights to fresh water to drink, clean air to breathe, and good food supplies to nourish and sustain all life for as many generations in front of us as we do behind us. So it is up to each and every one of us to be honourable in our actions and in our intentions. With that, I say thank you, Gidirigo. And before I run, I have one last ask of you. Can you say Yanu Yanu? That means you want to see me again, which I hope is true. Have a beautiful day and welcome to the lands of the Gadigal people.
Thank you, Binawee. This evening's event is a collaboration between 4 community organisations doing amazing work. We have Equality Australia, Interaction for Health and Human Rights, LGBTIQ Health Australia, and Health Equity Matters. All right, now we're going to get on to the panel this evening. I'm going to grab a seat and I'm going to introduce them all out on stage to come and sit down, and then I'll introduce them one by one. So come on out, guys. We've got Allegra, Stephen, Andrew, and Kate, just so you know where you're sitting. Give them a round of applause. On my far left, we have got the incumbent independent for Wentworth, Allegra Spender.
Hi, everyone.
Our only openly LGBTQIA plus panellist tonight, Greens member for Brisbane, Stephen Bates. He's also the party's LGBTQIA plus spokesperson. We have got Labor member, oh no, that's in the wrong order. We've got Liberal Senator for New South Wales, Shadow Assistant Minister for Home Ownership, and you may be thinking that Andrew should be down the road at the Housing Forum, but relevantly tonight, he ran the Lib Nats for Yes in the marriage equality campaign and has advocated for our communities in Parliament. So please welcome Senator Andrew Bragg. And our Labor member for Jagga Jagga, Labor's Assistant Minister for Social Security, Ageing and Women, Kate Thwaites. Thank you all for being here. Now, our panellists have been nominated to represent the views of their party, so LGBTQI plus people. Wherever you are in the country, you can make informed decisions at the ballot box. Allegra is the exception, given she's an independent, but the independents may hold a very powerful position if we get a minority government, and we thought it was important to include the views of at least one independent here tonight, and she does represent one of the gayest electorates in the country, and has made advocating for LGBTQIA plus people equality one of her defining priorities. So she seems like the right teal for the job.
Thanks.
Now, thank you, all of you, for joining us tonight. We appreciate you being here. And tonight we come together to listen to your answers as a diverse community. We represent 1 million voting bloc, and our voices and values matter. We're a community that does know the sting of disappointment when it comes to broken promises, and sadly we know some politicians do like to use our community to stoke a culture war. Hi Pauline, hi Clive. So across the country, LGBTQIA plus voters are looking closely at this election. So we're not just focused on promises, we are focused on action, and our community knows that elections aren't just about who speaks the loudest, they're about who listens the closest. And I think that that's why we're here, because when politicians listen to our stories, our hopes and our fears, they don't just earn our votes, but they also earn the chance to make Australia a better place for everyone. So tonight we will hear questions that go beyond politics. They'll be speaking to the heart of what it means to belong, to be seen, and to have your humanity respected. And with that, I would like to also say hello to the many people watching at home. I guess they're the cameras up the back. I'll wave hello. Hello. I know we've got some viewing parties at the Victorian Pride Centre and in South Australia, and about 1,000 other people joining us live. I wonder if this is like in like when you do an Instagram live and you you sit there quietly waiting for everybody to join, and you just say hello, hi, hi Mary, hi, hi Sally. Oh, I feel like Miss Romper Room. I can't remember her name.
Yes.
And through my magic mirror, I can see you, Courtney. She never said my name, but to be fair, that wasn't my name then. So it's not just these lovely smiling faces in the audience that you'll be speaking to tonight. It's all of those people at home. So as we move into tonight's discussion, I want to set a tone of respect and good faith. We ask our speakers to engage with integrity, to speak clearly to their party's values, and to debate with each other fairly. And remember that tonight is not a night for our community being used as a political football, far be it from me to use a sports metaphor. I've heard it's lovely though. But being here, each speaker shows a measure of respect for our community already, and we hope that respect shines through in your words tonight, but also if you are elected over the next 4 years. So let's get to the first question, shall we?
Great.
Where's Wayne?
Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, everyone. Hi, my name is Wayne Herbert. I live, work and play on the beautiful lands of the Ngunnawal people in the ACT. I've spent my career working extensively in the disability employment and LGBTIQA+ health space. And over many years, I've seen firsthand the health disparities that exist within our many communities, including in our intersectional communities. Last year, the Labor government launched a long-awaited 10-year national plan for the health and wellbeing of LGBTIQA plus people in Australia, together with $15.5 million of funding. While this is a welcome and historic and incredibly important step forward, the strategy is only partially funded and lacks an implementation plan. Will you and/or your party commit to fully funding the implementation of this important plan in partnership with our community? Basically, how do we make sure this significant and integral national plan doesn't sit on a shelf and simply gather dust?
Thank you, Wayne, for your question. And I'm going to head to Kate first, given this is Labor's plan. Let's start with you.
Great. Look, I brought a copy along, actually.
Oh, it's cute.
So, Wayne, thank you for that question. And I brought a copy along because it's so important, and you are right to say it was long awaited. And I know there's many people in this room and many people probably watching online who have been working for decades for this type of plan to be in place. So I'm really proud that a Labor government has done this work. We did, when we announced it, provide $15 million funding to get started on the work that sits with this plan. And just yesterday, I was in Melbourne with my colleague, the Assistant Minister for Health, Jed Carney, announcing a further $10 million, which will be directed towards primary healthcare, making sure that primary healthcare is inclusive for LGBTIQA plus communities. And I think that is so important. That is, as you all know, very often the place where people first turn up to get their health needs seen. So that is a sign of our commitment. That is a sign of how passionate we are about this, how grateful we are to everyone who's done the work with us. And our commitment is to also continue to doing the work with community. So this has been informed by experts, it's been informed by community. We will continue to work in that way because we know that health is much stronger when it's not just us doing the work, but it is us doing the work with all of you. So again, thank you for the question and thank you to everyone who's really helped us shape this. We will continue to make it a reality.
Thank you for your answer, Kate. An extra 10 million, that's a good something in the bucket there, that's good. Andrew, we're going to go to you next. Will the Coalition commit to implementing and funding Labor's action plan?
Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, Wayne, for your question. I'm very much against discrimination of all forms, and so we understand that we need to identify exactly the access points that are needed in the health space. I know that's a big issue for the community, and I think the government have done some good work here in progressing this. And we will be committing to also fund this particular strategy out of our budget, and let's see where it gets to. But I think it's important for the community that you know that you've got bipartisan support from the two major parties. Whoever wins the election, this process is funded, and sometimes it's important, particularly with more sensitive matters, that you can recognise that the other party can do good things. And I think Australians are looking for us to work together on issues where there frankly should never have been any politics in the first place, and it's really about ensuring that everyone can get access to high quality healthcare.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And Stephen, do you think the plan goes far enough?
I would love the plan to go a lot further than it does. I think it's really, like, to the government's credit, fantastic that they put this plan together. It's really, really good. I would have rather it didn't take the whole term for it to come out, of course, but it's excellent that they've been able to make this progress that they have done, and the announcement yesterday, really, really welcome as well. Really, really good move. One thing that does concern me about the plan itself is, as you actually already identified, the lack of implementation around it as well. That was missing from the initial report, so being able to see that in the next term of Parliament, I think, is really, really key. But also I want to make sure that we're not, now that we have this plan, I don't want it to become an excuse to not keep fighting and not keep pushing. So what sort of worries me as a queer person in politics is, yes, we have this plan. I don't want governments to start using it as an excuse to kick things down the road. So I think it's important that we constantly hold the government to account on this and say, why didn't you mention this in the last budget? Why is there no implementation plan in this process? But also doing things that we know we should be doing right now as well. So consultation is fantastic, and yes, we absolutely should do that and should work with the community. The community has told us what they want for many years now. And we're talking like removing the gay blood ban, expanding IVF to cover same-sex couples, so many different things in the health space that we already know we need, gender-affirming healthcare under Medicare, for example, so many things that we know we already need that we should be acting on now and not just kicking it into the long grass. So I think the plan is good, the plan is welcome, and we should keep pushing to make sure the plan is implemented, but also keep pushing the government to take bolder and more progressive steps than they have been so far.
Thank you, Stephen. And Allegra.
Look, I think, firstly, it is an honour to represent one of the gayest electorates in the country, so thank you very much, and very much those people who are from Wentworth. Look, I've got to say, credit to the government for doing this plan, and certainly, you know, when I'm out and about, particularly in my community, I hear firsthand how important it is. I was just at King's Cross at Lenkelly Place the other day, and a trans person came and talked to me about their challenges in accessing GPs, and they're concerned that most GPs don't feel confident to support them, and so that is a really significant issue. And so to see the government make that announcement yesterday speaks directly to that issue that was raised with me last week on the ground. The other big issues that are constantly raised with me are around mental health, seeing that the LGBTQ community experiences, 3 in 4 people experience mental health challenges, as well as what people often don't see is sort of domestic violence and sexual assault, not understanding that, how that affects the community and affects the community differently to other parts of the community. So I guess I see my role here is to hold the government to account, whatever government that is, to make sure that this plan is delivered. And I think, one-off funding is really important, but it is actually ongoing funding on priorities is what really normally moves the dial, and that's what I'll really be pushing for as the next term comes if I'm re-elected.
Thank you. Let's all take a lovely moment to acknowledge the agreement happening here on stage. See, politics doesn't have to be polarised. But health is really one of those areas where policy literally saves lives. So let's not forget that and move on to our next question, which is about responding to hate.
Good evening. My name is Lara and I'm a proud parent of 2 14-year-old boys. I'm also the chairperson of Rainbow Families Australia. There's been a noticeable increase in hate against our queer community. Protests that single out trans people, grinder bashings, book bans, vandalism and online harassment. I've experienced this personally. Online hate has forced Rainbow Families Australia to cancel drag story times for the safety of volunteers and families. Our events have been shared in online hate groups and the abuse has been vile and unrelenting, sometimes escalating to threats and hate groups showing up at our children's events. It's terrifying. Our community and Australians more generally don't want to see our country go down the same path as the US. But attacks on our communities must be called out by leaders like yourselves so that the attitudes that underpin them aren't seen to be condoned by people in positions of power. What will you do personally to stand for us? And what will your party do to stop the hate and provide our community with support?
Thank you, Lara. Stephen, as the only person who is a part of the LGBTIQA+ community on the panel, you no doubt have personal experiences in this, so let's begin with you.
Yeah, the personal experiences run quite deep actually and have become more prevalent as maybe you would expect, maybe you wouldn't, since becoming an MP. I actually stopped using Twitter because every time I posted something I got called a pedophile by countless people in the comments, and I'm sure lots of people have horrific experiences like that. With our community, people trying to ostracize us, kick us out, say that we don't have a place in society, and I think that one of the most important things we can do as leaders and people in the public sphere, I think we have a responsibility to try and bring people together and make sure that we're not pitting communities against one another, because that serves absolutely no one and only makes people feel less safe and less welcome. So from a policy standpoint, I think 100% we need an LGBTIQA+ human rights commissioner. This is a field that even the Sex Discrimination Commissioner said that they were unable to explore in depth because they didn't have enough resources to be able to do it. So adopting that at a policy level would allow that office, that department, to be able to examine discrimination in society through our government departments and institutions and be able to improve things at a very sort of tangible material level there. But at a broader cultural level, I think it's our responsibility in our positions is to call it out whenever you see it and to not let things slip, because otherwise we will go backwards. So it's one thing to be overtly homophobic, transphobic, whatever it is, and of course everyone, I would hope, would call that out to its face. But it's also important to hold people accountable and allies accountable when they do let us down. And I think we did see that this term of Parliament with the census and the debacle around there. I think, well, obviously the decision itself, and I don't blame the Labor Party, because it was a captain's call. That's how it was reported in the media by the Prime Minister. And so I think it's important to say that while that decision may not be overtly homophobic, it does show that you might stand up for us when it's politically palatable, but when there's threats from the far right and Trumpian politics and everything coming into the country, you can't become a coward. Like, you have to actually stand. You have to stand with the community and for the community when it's politically convenient, but also when it's really, really hard to, because that's when we need you more than ever. And so obviously, I obviously am going to support my own community, and I find it easy to support my own community because I love and respect everyone in the community. And I say that genuinely, not as some sort of crutch, but I think it's also important to stand up for all vulnerable and marginalised people in society. And I think when you can't have one rule for me and one for thee. Your values have to be consistent across the board. And so, yes, the census decision was disappointing, and I'm glad that because everyone basically in this room, all the organisations and people from across the aisle worked together, we were able to get most of that reversed. It should never have happened. And I think it was a bit of a failure of leadership, to be honest.
Thank you very, very much for your answer, Stephen. Allegra, you advocate strongly for our community, especially during the recent debate on the hate crimes bill. What would you like to see happen?
Look, I think firstly, to the point that Stephen made about allies, I think it's really important to be an ally, and I'm not a member of the LGBTIQA plus community, but I'm very proud to be an ally and a public ally, particularly on speaking out on things like the books and the story time and things like that. It's really, really important. But I think there's a really important role for law reform here. We have seen that escalation in hate, and we know also that words matter, and this comes from the Director of General of ASIO. Words matter, and they can lead to violence and intimidation. And no one in our community, whatever your sexuality, religion, it doesn't matter. That you should not be subjected to hate. And in one of the most diverse and successfully diverse countries in this world, we can't let people breed hate. So I think in this Parliament, we have seen some positive moves in terms of sort of hate crimes, particularly around threats of violence. But what we didn't see, and what I will pursue, and what I'm disappointed, to be honest, that the major parties didn't back, was law reform around incitement or promotion of hatred. Because we do need, I think, at the federal level, a law against the promotion of hatred. It should be, it's got to be proportionate, it should be appropriate, but I think we need that because we saw that what happened in Melbourne, about a year ago, where they did have that anti-trans protest where people were saying destroy pedo freaks in big posters, and were trying to really weaponise and frighten the community. And we know that there are limited currently levers that can be pulled, and not national levers. So that's what I will be continuing to pursue, to have law reform that is around in incitement and promotion of hate. And just to give people reassurance in relation to free speech, we've had those sorts of laws in WA for about 20 years. They have a lot of free speech over there. They're a talkative bunch, but no, there's a lot of, it hasn't inhibited freedom of speech. So I think that is it's a sort of distraction. There is an important way of having guardrails against those people who are trying to promote hatred between parts of our community. legally while still being able to, speak freely as you would like to be an Australian. So that law reform, I think, is absolutely critical.
Thank you, Allegra.
Thank you.
And on to you, Kate.
Oh, well, it's a really important question, and I would start by saying that absolutely we do not want to go down US-style politics here in Australia, and I think you would have all have seen that has been a theme so far of this election campaign. Australia is a country that is tolerant and is inclusive, and that is something that a Labor government will always stand up for. We do not want US-style policies here. And it is true that there is too much hate as well. There is too much hate online. There is too much hate in communities. And I know this has been the case in my community. My community is in Melbourne. And we had one of our local libraries targeted because it was holding a drag story time. And that was a time to stand up. And that's what I did as a federal member, together with my state colleague, who actually is the Victorian Equality Minister, Vicky Ward, together with our local councillors. We all got together at the library with the community to be very clear that this was an inclusive space, that this was somewhere for everyone, and that our community does not stand for hate. So that's part of it. There is work for all of us to do in our individual communities. There is work for elected officials like us to do in our individual communities. And there is national work to do as well, and that is why we have passed hate crimes laws that do provide the strongest protection that has ever been there for LGBTIQ plus people. That is really important. That protection needs to be there. That is work that we have done. We are also working, and I know we're working with Equality Australia on this, on a database to record hate crimes as well. I think that is an important part of the puzzle, so that we also understand what is going on and we have a record on that. That does help us as lawmakers then to respond in the right way and to make sure we are doing absolutely everything we need to make sure that people do feel safe and that we are not taking a path where people's lives are being treated as political footballs, where hate is something that is a go-to in our community. That is not the Australian way, and it is certainly not the Australia that Labor is trying to build.
Thank you, Kate. Andrew, Kate just mentioned the hate register. We'd love to know whether the coalition will continue with that if elected.
Well, I've often said that the mark of a good society is how it protects minority interests. And this community is not alone in facing some pretty nasty activity over the last little while. And so one of the proposals in Parliament, which you just referred to, Courtney and Kate did, is the idea of having a register of hate crimes. It's something that the Jewish community has maintained itself for many years, and it's something that we're very open to supporting, and we're waiting to see some detail from the government. Obviously, we're now in election mode, so whoever wins will have to determine how that would actually look. But the idea would be we would work with the industry, work with the sector, with Equality, to have a register of those crimes and then take any other advice that's required. And look, my view as a legislator is that if that's your starting principle, that you want to defend minority interests as part of a pluralist society, then you take advice as it comes and you legislate as you need to.
Thank you. When it comes to hate, silence from leaders can speak volumes, so thank you all for your clarity tonight. And now on to our next question, which is about the virtual elimination of HIV transmission.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephen Spencer. I'm the Vice President of the National Association of People with HIV Australia. I'm a person living with HIV. I was diagnosed about 6 years ago. I won't tell you what age, so you can't do the math. Now, I've grown up in a period of extraordinary hope for the HIV epidemic in Australia. We've set our sights on the virtual elimination of HIV transmissions by 2030. This is all thanks to things like testing, PrEP, HIV treatment, and all led by the incredible work of our HIV community organisations, and of course backed up by bipartisan commitments across government. But for me as a person living with HIV during this period, it's been incredibly difficult. I explained like my medications keep me alive, but it was the HIV community and our sector organisations that saved my life, because I found out the hard way that HIV stigma and discrimination are not just debilitating, but can be deadly, and every person living with HIV understands that. HIV stigma spreads fast. We see HIV criminalisation potentially spreading across Australia, And I also fear that future governments may take their foot off the pedal right at the moment when we need them to keep going full steam ahead to ensure the proper funding and support are provided to close any remaining gaps in our HIV response. The HIV epidemic has taken too much from too many for too long now, and we have the hope of ending HIV very soon. I would like to ask each of you, what will you do to achieve virtual elimination of HIV transmission and address HIV stigma and discrimination experienced by people living with HIV? Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Kate, let's start with you.
Great, thank you for that question. And you've really gone through there both why this work is so important and also how far we've come. And certainly for us, since coming to government, I know that the Health Minister, Mark Butler, when he became the Health Minister, made a commitment to this. It was disappointing for him at that time to see that some of the measures that allow this work to continue hadn't been funded by the previous Liberal government in a way that would have allowed them to continue. Now, that's something that he fixed. We are now on track with funding to make the work happen, and that is vital. And you've explained many reasons why that is vital, but I think everyone here and so many members of the community are helping us get to that end goal. So obviously the HIV task force that, again, Minister Butler has led is doing vital work in this space. Again, I think to show the commitment the Minister has brought and the dedication to this space. Things like PrEP treatment. When that was in short supply in Australia, it's something that through the work of the task force and others, the Minister was able to work with industry to make sure that people were getting supply. We have provided $44 million towards the work as well. It's not done yet, but it is really impressive how much has been achieved. Certainly there is a commitment from us as a Labor government to continue that work, with the task force and with all the people here and online who, again, have been working on this for decades and have expertise and know both what we've achieved but what we still need to get done as well.
Thank you, Kate. Andrew, will the coalition maintain bipartisanship on this issue?
Well, as you probably know, the Liberal Party and Greg Hunt put PrEP on the PBS in government, and we have had a 40-year history of seeking to work on a bipartisan basis on these bloodborne diseases. And in fact, in government, we put a large amount of money on the table just a couple of years before the last election. So we are very committed. And in fact, the history of this goes back to Peter Boehm, who was a senator for New South Wales. Maurice Payne did a lot of work on this. So there's been a strong tradition inside my branch of the Liberal Party, the New South Wales division, of working very closely on HIV/AIDS issues. And personally, I'm very committed to making sure that is maintained as part of our body of work. And we will work closely with you and anyone else who has ideas. But it's very important that we maintain the bipartisan ethos here, because Australia on the fight against HIV/AIDS was a world leader, I think, because of that position, that it was bipartisan between Peter Boehm and the Labor Party at the time, and I think that is really important that we maintain that stance.
Thank you. Allegra.
Look, thank you very much for sharing your journey. I have St Vincent's in my electorate, and I'm, when you think about the history of AIDS in this country, and actually that Australia is, has the possibility to be the first country in the world to eliminate the transmission of HIV. I think back to the Sisters of Mercy and everything that community did to get us at the start of this journey. But talking about listening to your own experience, it sounds like although we've made huge strides, there is still a huge way to go. I think in terms of, firstly, the commitments, it's great to hear there is bipartisanship commitments on this. And I think, this is important not just for Australia, but I actually think, more broadly to lead the world, to show that this can be done and how this can be done. I think this, I love to see Australia lead the world on what's important, and this is a perfect example of it. So I think that support is really critical and one that we need to hold, be accountable to. And I think it talks more broadly, to this question of health, and, particularly for the LGBTQIA plus community. And, Stephen mentioned the census before. That's another reason why I think things like having the data, why I'm so passionate about supporting the census, and more broadly, we need to understand the needs of this community and make sure that those needs are, documented, have the data that allows us to react and respond, because, the best sort of health and support comes when you have the data, when you know what you're dealing with, and then you can put that support in where it's needed, whether it's on HIV or whether it's in other areas. So it's really important. But thank you for sharing your story. I think we do need to have more stories out there, including the stories of success for HIV, because I think that will help lessen the stigma. I think if people realise that it's barely transmitted at all in this country, people will lose some of the fear and the stigma. I think that is also really, really important.
Thank you, Allegra. Stephen.
Sorry, I'm sitting on my wire here, so apologies if I hope people can hear me. It was Stephen, wasn't it? Great name. Thank you. Just to echo what Allegra said as well, actually, thank you for sharing your story, because I think it's the same with all sort of marginalised groups. Sharing your story and putting it out there actually helps reduce the stigma. It makes people realise that they're not alone and that there are people like them out there who are going through similar things. And it gives, like you said, it's a story of hope. It gives people hope. So thank you for sharing. I think, excellent that there's bipartisan support on this. That's fantastic. Tripartisan, if you include the Greens, on this as well. And fantastic that the Health Minister, Mark Butler, put funding into the action plan for the elimination of transmission by 2030. I think that's fantastic. I also think something we need to be doing is making sure that people have access to the healthcare they need when they need it, and making sure that it's affordable. And so something that actually I get to announce here tonight is that the Greens are committing to fully fund PrEP under the PBS going forward, PrEP and PEP. It's about $6 million a year, and that is fully costed by the PBO, so that is something that we would actually be able to do to make sure that people have access to the healthcare they need when they need it at no cost to them. And I think it's especially important that we're investing in this now, especially as we see, USAID and the withdrawal of funding for HIV support that they've done around the world. I think it's especially important for Australia to step up and step into that space. And we do that by making sure that everyone in our community is looked after and has support for the healthcare they need, but also that everyone around the world has support for it as well, because otherwise I don't think we'll end the stigma unless we're doing that at a national level and an international level as well. So, yes.
Thank you. I mean, gosh, as someone who, grew up in the 80s and 90s and to see how far we've come, the idea that Australia can virtually end HIV transmission in just 5 years is a pretty amazing thing. So thank you to all the people in this room who do that work as well. And now let's move on to our fourth question, which is about bodily autonomy for intersex people.
Good evening. My name's Margie McCumsty, and I was born with a variation of sex characteristics, also known as being intersex or having a difference of sexual development. People with innate variations of sex characteristics have many different kinds of bodies and a full range of genders, identities, and life experiences. For me, I am an intersex woman. I was assigned female at birth and have always lived my life as a female, although I have XY chromosomes. Like many intersex people, surgery was performed on me without my informed consent to fix me. I did not need fixing. This unwanted surgery has impacted my life and it resulted in a range of medical conditions. The Darlington Community Consensus Statement and the Australian Human Rights Commission have recommended legal reform to prevent non-essential surgical or hormonal interventions before intersex people are old enough to consent. The federal government has a part to play in developing a national approach so that every intersex person in our country can grow up to live a full and dignified life in which they decide what happens to their own bodies. What will you or your party do to protect the bodily autonomy of intersex people, especially children?
Thank you for that, Margie. Andrew, let's start with you.
Well, thank you very much. I would say to you that we are very much in favour of people being able to make their own judgments about what is right for them. And so we're quite open-minded about the future prospect of law reform, noting, I think, as you have in your question, that a lot of these things will be ultimately up to the states and territories, but if there is an opportunity for the national government to ensure that we protect people and allow people to make their own judgments, then that, of course, would be worthy of our support in the least.
Thank you. Allegra.
Thank you, Margie, for sharing your story. I must say this is an area which, you know, it's an area I've been learning about. It's not an area I knew much about before, and even in this particular issue, I didn't understand before, pretty recently how this happened and how the impact that this has had on people such as yourself. And so I think that, I hope that this is an area where, people can unite. I think my understanding is there's a lot of state law in here and different states are at different stages. But in that case with state law, I always think there's a role for the federal, government to take a leadership role and to say, look, let's move on and let's, look after children and give them opportunity to have that consent, for things that affect them. And, that is, fundamental choices that you do want people to be able to have at the time when they can make that decision for themselves. So I very much support that, and I certainly hope to see, wide support across the Parliament. You make a very, very strong case. Thank you.
Thank you, Allegra. Stephen.
Yeah, thank you again for sharing your story. And I know when I've shared stories about my experiences as Parliament, it's very easy to get emotional, but I think emotions are good because they show people that these are...
your first speech.
Oh yeah,
It was beautiful.
I didn't mean to cry that much, but I think it puts a human face to these topics that we talk about and makes people realise that, oh, these are people in my community. This could be my neighbour, my friends, people that I may not be aware of that are going through this. So thank you for doing that. I think that similar to Allegra's point, actually, I think that this is an area that doesn't get talked about a lot in the political sphere, and I think that's because of a lack of knowledge and a fear of messing things up. And I think that it's important that we obviously support the Darlington Statement, and it's something that the Greens have supported and endorsed, and obviously still support and endorse that as well. But I think it's about education of people in the political sphere and in the policy sphere as well, to understand that this is an issue that faces quite a large population in the country, and an issue that hasn't been given much voice historically. So I think, and you talk about specifically children as well, and I think I know one of the recommendations in the Darlington Statement, and sort of I think maybe a starting point, a sort of a bit of change in policy and tact is sort of that your fully funded sort of your mandatory counselling support for families and children and your peer support services as well, so that people do get access to the information that they need when they need it, because it's all... and in a way that is understandable for families who may not have experienced this before, and for the children as well, so that they actually are more aware of what is happening and what is going on, so that we can avoid situations like you've described as well. So.
Thank you. Kate, last year Australia joined other member states in bringing a landmark UN Human Rights Council resolution protecting the rights and freedoms of intersex people. What's next for Labor?
Margie, thank you for your question and for sharing your story. And you're so right, you didn't need fixing. And it is important that our health system is one that does not discriminate against people and that gives people choice. So again, thank you for the points that you have made. As others have said, some of this work does sit at a state and territory level, but certainly from a Labor government perspective. In 2013, it was a Labor government that amended the Sex Discrimination Act to make sure that intersex was a protected characteristic. So we do want to make sure that people are not being discriminated against. There is, I think, more work to be done in this space, and we need to do it with community to make sure that you are entering into a health system that is inclusive, that doesn't discriminate, and where you feel heard. So again, thank you for raising all of those with me.
Thank you. Thank you, Margie. And listening to intersex voices means letting them lead and not making those decisions for them. So thank you for sharing your story. We appreciate it. Our next question, number 5, is about discrimination in religious schools.
Hi folks, my name is Karen Pack. I'm a Christian and an ordained pastor. In 2020 I was fired from my job at a Christian school here in Sydney because I got engaged to Bronte, who is now my wife. Cheers. At the time, the school issued a statement to staff and students in which they acknowledged that I have a deep faith and I'm an excellent educator. But in the same statement, they said that they decided to fire me because mine is a same-sex marriage. Now, in the time since that's happened, there's been multiple reviews and attempts to change the law. But the reality is that discrimination is still happening because of gaps in our laws around the country that allow discrimination in religious schools and allow them to play by their own rules. And in fact, since that happened to me, I personally know of 4 people that have been fired. 3 of them because they came out as gay. 1, a straight white man who in chapel told queer students that God loves them exactly as they are. He was fired the next day. So, I don't question your sympathies. I know that we have them. But I'd like to know what you're going to do. What is it that you or your party will do to prevent queer people from being fired, expelled or discriminated against by religious schools, which we know rely on a heck of a lot of taxpayer funding?
Thank you, Karen. Allegra, I'll start with you.
Look, thank you again for sharing your story. And I know it's not just about teachers, I also know that it's about kids. And again, I've had kids come and talk to me about their experience. A trans kid came and talked to me about their experience in their school and how they were pushed out. In this case, they weren't expelled, but they were effectively pushed out of a school because of who they are. And, you know, in this day and age, it's just not acceptable. You know, it's funny, I was door knocking one day and this guy approached me and was telling me how I was too woke and, you know, there was no prejudice against LGBTQ communities. And I said, did you know that kids can be expelled from school or teachers can be fired because they're gay? And he's like, no, they can't. Of course they don't. And it's like, no, so even this guy he was not, I think he said he was actually a Trump supporter. This is back in October. I don't know if he still is. But, you know, even someone like him couldn't believe that this is still what happens in this day and age. And, you know, we've done all the reviews, we actually know what needs to change. It's the question of political will. In terms of what I've done, what I care about, I've written to both the Attorney General and to the Shadow Attorney General about this when there was a bit of a debate in Parliament this Parliament, and said, sort it out. Because this is time to move on with the law reform. This is the time to find the right balance to protect LGBTQA plus community members, be it teachers, be it allies, or be it students, so that they are safe in their schools, and still be able to provide, you know, people's ability to you know, celebrate and, you know, work in their faith. And we need to do better. We can do better. And, you know, in different states in this country, we actually have better protections. New South Wales is a problem. And we know that the states haven't stepped up, and this is the role for federal government and federal leadership. We know what needs to be done. And my job is, as a crossbencher, is to continue to fight this fight and continue to stand up on this issue, because I think the community expectations across this country, you know, whatever your sexuality or gender, is that, you know, that this isn't modern Australia, and it's time that the laws get up with community expectations.
Thank you, Allegra. Stephen, is removing Section 38 of the Sex Discrimination Act, which is the exemptions that allow religious schools to discriminate on the basis of sexuality and gender identity, part of the Greens LGBTQIA+ policy platform?
In a word, yes.
All right, moving on.
In a few more words, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think your story actually in particular really hits on something that I find quite personal as well. I grew up in the Catholic Church, altar boy, the whole 9 yards, you name it. And I think it's something that gets lost in this debate and conversation, is there are actually a lot of queer people who are religious. and they're being excluded from their communities of faith as a result of this. So this isn't just all, it is about making sure that people aren't being discriminated against in the broader community based on sexuality, gender identity, marital status. That's also a carve out in the SDA as well, but also about welcoming more people into communities of faith. I think it's actually possible to do both in this situation. And I know it was, to echo again Allegra's point, and I know we did stuff together on this. During this parliament where after the ALRC reform recommendations came down, which we all the Greens supported, and I would think that Labor would as well, since they asked for those recommendations. It was disappointing when there was a path through Parliament that didn't involve the coalition that was not taken. We'd written to the Attorney General multiple times, publicly, privately. I got up in question time and asked a question of him, which, to be quite candid with you all, was actually one of the most humiliating moments of my life, was standing up in Parliament and saying, "Will you please give me my rights, sir? Thank you very much." And I could barely get through the question because I was so embarrassed having to ask it. So it was, extremely upsetting and aggravating that where there was this other path through the crossbench in both the House and the Senate, that path was not taken. Like, we had the opportunity to actually do it. We weren't asking for anything like completely outrageous or outlandish. It was just implement these recommendations that you asked for, that have been asked for time and time and time again, just implement them now. And yes, there's probably going to be pushback. There's going to be pushback no matter what you do. We can't live our lives on the fear that the far right might get unhappy at us. I think we've all managed to survive through our lives despite that so far. And so, yes, it's extremely frustrating. But yeah, there are paths forward, literally just implementing those recommendations, which are removing that right to discriminate, but while keeping the ability for schools and institutions to preference people of the same faith in their hiring processes. I think that's a perfectly reasonable line.
Thank you. Andrew, we have heard commitments from the coalition to religious groups that no religious Australian will, quote, go backwards under the coalition government. Does this mean that the laws that allow discrimination against LGBTQ staff and students will be allowed to stay?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the exact part of the question, but I'll try and deal with it. But firstly, can I say to you, Karen, and to Bronte, congratulations. You've been a great advocate on this issue, and it is an issue of fairness. There have been teachers who are members of the Liberal Party who've been sacked from their jobs, which has been outrageous. And the laws here are not right. And I'm sorry that we haven't been able to fix it as a parliament. I would say to you that the Morrison government made a very bad attempt to play around here, and we stopped that, as you may recall. That was very difficult, but I thought it was important that we stopped what was going to make the situation even worse. Look, I think the principle in my mind has always been that if a religious institution wants to be a religious institution, it should be allowed to be, and it should be able to teach in accordance with its ethos, and it should be able to hire people that are going to teach in accordance with its ethos. But it shouldn't be able to discriminate based on personal attributes. And that's what we've seen here in your case, and that's what needs to be fixed. So, long story short, I'm not sure if I've answered your question, Courtney, but what I'm trying to articulate is, I think it's reasonable that the institutions can be what they want to be, but they cannot discriminate against people. So they can discriminate in favour of their faith, but they cannot discriminate against individuals based on their own personal characteristics. And the problem we're trying to fix is that people are doing the right thing and are teaching in accordance with the ethos of the school, but are being sacked for other reasons, and that is wrong. And that is what we need to fix.
Thank you. This is your personal or party position?
I mean, that's our position. I mean, we don't support discrimination. There's a large body of work that needs to be done to bring to bear the ALRC report, and the government did not allow that bill to be publicly disclosed. They gave it to us in secret. We were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements, and so the public hasn't seen the Labor Party's bill. I'm only making this point because I know we're trying not to be political tonight, but I think the reality is that there may have been opportunities to progress this, but who knows? I mean, the bill was never made public. It was given to us in secret. And so this last parliament that Labor has had in government was not able to progress these issues. So in future, our position is that we want to eliminate discrimination.
Thank you. Kate, will Labor be reaffirming its commitment from the last election when it pledged to remove the exemptions that allow religious schools to discriminate against our communities?
Look, no one should be discriminated at school because of who they are or because of what they believe in, and teachers and students should not be discriminated against at school. As you've heard from a few different perspectives on the panel tonight, this is something that Labor has tried to work on in this term of Parliament. And as we've done that work, there are two things that we have decided are really important. And the first of those is that we do not want an incredibly divisive, hateful debate. And, you know, I take the point that sometimes we need to have hard conversations and hard debates, but people in this room also know what it looks like when there are hate campaigns being carried out and when our national conversation is targeting people because of who they are. So that is something that we did not want. The second part was that we wanted laws that are going to stand the test of time. And this is where the passage through Parliament becomes important and where bipartisanship becomes important, because, to be honest, there are two parties of government on the stage, and if we do not win the next election, it will be a Liberal Party that is in government. And we do not want reforms that people work hard for, that are difficult, that will, you know, create a difficult debate. We do not want to go through all of that and then have a future government, Liberal government, just unwind it. Now, we were in the situation where the Liberal Party would not engage with us on these laws, so we could not find a way forward on them, and that is really hard, and I know there are so many people in this room who are disappointed in that, and I do understand that. We do want to find a bipartisan way forward. We certainly do not want to be in the situation we were under the Morrison government, where we are, in the situation of having to block people losing rights. So, again, I note that this is something that we have tried to work on. We will continue to try and find a bipartisan way through.
Does that mean that the Coalition and Labor have to agree on everything in order for Labor to take advances?
I think it means that we have to agree on everything, but I really, those two things that I talked about, making sure that we are not in a position where this is being weaponised, that is really important. And making sure that we are getting something that is enduring, that is really important as well.
Thank you. You know, when young people are kicked out of schools and denied opportunities for being who they are, you know, that's discrimination. And we hope that we're able to, in this next term, find a pathway through, as you say, Kate. So thank you. Our next question is about support for trans people.
Thank you, Courtney, and it's lovely to see you all here. Thank you. My name's Teddy Cook, and I've worked in this field of trans health and LGBTQ health for about 15 years. I know I couldn't possibly look like I have, but I know firsthand what it means to be a trans person seeking to access healthcare. I'm a proud man of trans experience. But whether that be general care or primary care or accessing gender-affirming care, it can cause a great deal of trauma and pain, as I'm sure you are aware. But given the escalations and attacks that we've been seeing on trans people all across the country, in fact, some of you have spoken about it today, and I've listened carefully to what you've said about the importance of self-determination and autonomy for everybody. But I'm particularly curious to know what you and your party will do to support trans communities, and particularly including protections, but also access to gender-affirming care. Thank you.
Thank you, Teddy. Andrew, we've recently become aware of a Liberal candidate response to an Australian Christian lobby questionnaire, which has raised questions about the opposition support for trans people. What do you want to comment on this?
Well, I mean, firstly, if it's to do with medical access, then that is paramount, I should say, and we will always work with equality and any other LGBT health groups to identify any barriers. In terms of the conduct of the public debate, it has been my strong view that the public debate would not be well served by giving Pauline Hanson an inquiry into these issues in the Senate, which she's sought to establish multiple times, and I'm pleased that senators have voted that down. In its place, the issues here have now been pushed into a review commissioned by Mark Butler, and we are supporting that inquiry, and we'll see what comes from that. But I think there's a practical piece or an access, and then there is a conduct of debate piece. And what I feel most sorry about is that people have used this community to tee off on for political purposes, and that's why I thought it was very important that that was not to be supported by giving people a formal parliamentary process to do even more of that.
Andrew, you were of the Australian Christian Lobby website, australiavotes.now.org.au, that uses Liberal Party answers to a questionnaire that sort of spouts...
Can you be a bit more specific?
Yeah, sure.
Yep. Sorry.
No, that's okay. The Australia Votes website has got statements from the Liberal Party in response to a questionnaire they were provided that, I don't know if I need to traumatise the queer community with the words that it says, but we've got...
Do you want me to talk to some of the issues? So I think to do with the sports issue, I mean, my view is that the sporting organisations are working that out themselves. They don't need Parliament or government to come in and do anything. What's the next one?
We affirm the biological fact that there are two sexes and a small group who are intersex or indeterminate. We want women's spaces to be protected, particularly women's sport, consistent with principles of fairness. Similarly, we believe in protecting the innocence and sanctity of childhood.
So for the bulk of Australia, there are two sexes, but there are people who identify differently for various reasons, and I'm a live and let live guy, so I think, I'm not worried about what people are doing, frankly. And so that's my view on that. What's the last part?
I mean, that's your view on that, but these are Liberal Party responses. So I guess what we're concerned about is, if this is coming from the Liberal Party as answers to a questionnaire, it does make people in this room feel uncomfortable about whether the Liberal Party does support trans people or not.
Well, we do.
It was...
we support everyone. We're against discrimination. And so, as I said to you, we're not of the view that the sporting codes can run their own race. We don't need to have legislation there. In terms of the broader issues that have been flagged in relation to healthcare, we're supporting the review that Mark Butler has commissioned in the Labor government. And I think, does that helped at all?
Well, I mean, in a back announce to the religious question, it says here, we place heavy importance on parental choice when it comes to children's education, and we're strongly committed to protecting faith-based schools. And so I guess, it feels like that question could imply that young people in schools, in faith-based schools, wouldn't be safe if they came out as LGBTQ.
Well, that's not what I said before, so that's not our position.
Okay. Well, I guess...
Our position in relation to these issues is that we are against discrimination, and we have sought to work with other parties in Parliament, but unfortunately, for some reason, we weren't able to progress the bill the Labor Party had. They didn't make it known publicly, and so they didn't advance it. But obviously, we would like to eliminate discrimination in these schools. That's our position.
I guess someone from the Liberal comms team should be in contact with the australiavotes.org.au ACL website and tell them that they're out of step with your views. Stephen, what will the Greens do to support trans people, including access to healthcare?
Thank you for the question, first of all. I think I've already sort of outlined it a little bit tonight when I talked about getting gender-affirming healthcare into Medicare. I think that's something that is long overdue. It's about making sure people have universal access to healthcare as a core principle, and we do that by expanding what we put into the Medicare system so that people can access the healthcare they need when they need it, and making sure that it's affordable. I've been campaigning on this issue for years now. Like recently, it's also come to a bit of a head in Queensland in the last few months, with the government up there banning access to puberty blockers for children, which has been very, very disturbing and disappointing. Actually disappointing doesn't cover it. I was about to swear, but I'm not going to do that. It's been really, really messed up to do that, to block young people and children's access to essential healthcare that we know there's review after review after review from states in this country, from academic groups around the world, that these sorts of medications are life-saving. They have some of the lowest regret rates of any sort of healthcare or surgery or whatever it may be across the board. And so it's about making sure that we're investing in healthcare for young people and, well, for all trans people, but especially for young children, so that they have access to the healthcare they need when they need it, and making sure it is affordable in the process of doing that. I'm not sure how much clearer I could make that, but yes, the Greens will always support trans people, every vote, every single time.
Thank you. And now on to you, Kate.
Thank you. And yes, we've talked a lot about healthcare already tonight, and it is a big focus and has been and will continue to be a big focus for our government. We want a Medicare system that works for all, and that is where I think the announcement we made yesterday around primary healthcare is particularly important. That is somewhere in our communities where trans people and others go looking for that support. They go looking for the right medical advice. If we're having our GPs, our community health centres, if they're ready and able to deal with that in the appropriate way, that is a huge difference. Obviously, as has been discussed, the Health Minister has commissioned the NHMRC to conduct a review as well, and I think that's important that, again, we have the best possible evidence guiding this work. I do want to just finish on this point by saying that I also want to be clear about what Labor won't be doing in this space, and we will not be using some of the most vulnerable young people in our community as political footballs. That is just unacceptable. That is not the country, that is not Australia, that is not how we treat vulnerable people in our community. So that's a really firm commitment as well.
Thank you, Kate. And Allegra.
Look, I think, we started out talking about healthcare, and we started out, I was talking about trans healthcare and how important it is. And, I, again, wanted to reiterate my support for that healthcare, for those opportunities for young people that is appropriate, but driven by, doctors and medicine, not by the Senate, because that is the last place you should have a debate about something as... No, and I'm going to make a point here, which is that, Andrew, I respect your position on this, and I think you've been very principled. Unfortunately, 18 of the 30 coalition senators didn't agree with you and supported Pauline Hanson in that piece. And so I think this is something that I think we need to do everything we can to keep out of political football. We have seen this in the US. This is absolutely core of what we do not want to let come into this country in terms of the sort of, playing political football with people's lives, and particularly young people's lives. And unfortunately, we are seeing this. And so that's why, again, come back to the hate speech point that I made earlier. It's why, I will continue to push the major parties on this, because, this is both about healthcare, but it is also about hate. And it's about people who spread and use hate and are using hatred, using the trans community, frankly, as a way of prosecuting a culture war, which is what the last thing that we need and what the community needs at the moment. And then I think just finally, in terms of I think this is part of why it's important to have different voices in Parliament, because sometimes there are issues where you do get, I think, the sort of, whether it be the sort of religious discrimination area where, the major party is saying, look, it's their fault, no, it's their fault. And I think what we've got to try and find a way is to say, look, it's not, I don't care whose fault it is. I don't actually know whose fault it is because I wasn't party to those conversations in terms of, why we don't have those changes in the religious discrimination law. But what we need to do is to continue to stand up and speak up, and to have different voices speaking up, both for the trans community, but for the LGBTQIA plus community, because you need those voices across the board, and recognise that there are more voices out there and more people out here who to support the community. So it's a bit of a long answer to, and a varied answer to your question, but I think it's, that sort of culture war, and that is not acceptable, and we have to fight that with the healthcare. We have to fight that with the hate speech, and then we just have to fight that with leadership, showing that this is the trans community is an important part of the community. It's a very important part of my community, and a part of the community I'm very proud to support.
Thank you, Allegra. I think a lot of people in Australia don't know a trans person.
Yeah.
We don't have great representation on television or in the media, and I think that storytelling is so important in helping to show Australians, maybe Australians who don't agree, that trans folks are just people trying to get their Starbucks order right, and that there's no great agenda here, and that representation is so important, but obviously, representation without protection is a trap, and so what happens in Parliament is so important too. All right. We've made it to the end, everybody. And we've got some final thoughts time. We've got a minute on the clock for each of you. I'm going to start with Allegra and work my way down the line. So Allegra Spender, MP, Independent Member for Wentworth.
Thank you so much. So thank you for having me today, both everybody here and at home. It's an honour, as I said, to represent probably the biggest LGBTQI plus community in the country. The census will tell us if that's true or not, but I'm hoping it is. And I'm also delighted now that the Mardi Gras is pretty much entirely in my electorate. That is the other big benefit of the redistribution. I've got to say, in my community, the diversity and inclusivity of the community I represent is a constant inspiration for me, but it is also something I fight very, very strongly to protect, because we've talked a lot about political footballs, we've talked about culture wars. We don't need that here, because that doesn't represent our country. I think our country is a very moderate and inclusive country, and we all need to fight to protect that, and particularly to protect the LGBTQI plus community within that. So I want you to know that you have a friend and ally, whether I get re-elected or not. I am that person. But also, and while I'm proud of what we've achieved in the Parliament, and and many, I think, really positive things have been achieved, I think there are some things more to do. It is around religious discrimination, discrimination against LGBTQI plus community members in schools. It is around the hate speech is really, really important to me, is one I will pursue. And then just more that standing up against the culture wars and standing up as an ally, that's what I will do, because it's just important about the values of our country and making sure that we continue to stand up for those values. Thank you.
Stephen Bates, MP, Greens member for Brisbane.
It's been a pleasure actually being, I think maybe my electorate might come second in terms of number of queer people in it, but again, friendly competition, we'll find out when the census drops. But it's a real honour being one of the very few openly queer members of Parliament. You get quite a lot of privilege that comes from that, with being able to sit at the table and be part of the decision-making process that actually directly impacts our community. And it's been good to see that there have been steps this term in terms of the Health and Wellbeing Action Plan and the steps towards the ending of HIV transmission by 2030, but there's so much more that needs to be done for our community that is being put in the too hard basket, and it is up to us in the Greens and up to people on the crossbench to make sure that we're pushing and holding the government of the day accountable, and that our communities are being our agenda is being put on the table. And what that looks like is, like I've said before, ending the gay blood ban, making sure that same-sex couples have access to IVF treatments, getting gender-affirming healthcare into Medicare, establishing an LGBTIQA plus Human Rights Commissioner, and making sure that we have PrEP and PEP available on the PBS free for anyone that has a prescription. And I'm actually dropping an OnlyFans tonight that has a video about that policy on it, so make sure you check that out. It's not what immediately comes to your head, so don't worry. But there's so much that our community needs, and there's so much that our community has to get done, because otherwise we know we're just going to be left behind. And it's one thing to sort of pay lip service to our community and stand by our community and with our community when it's politically convenient, but right now it is not actually politically convenient to stand with our community. If you look at what's happening around the world with the rise of Trump and what's happening in countries like Hungary, I'm very worried that we're about to go down a very dark place in the history of the world. And it is up to people in positions of power, it's up to community to make sure that we do not go down that path. I've lived in the United States. That's actually what made me political and made me want to get involved in politics, was going through that society, going through that healthcare system. We cannot let that happen here. I've dedicated quite literally most of my adult life to making sure that that does not happen. And we are a deer in headlights right now in this country. We have the advantage, for better and for worse, of being about 10 years behind what's happening in the US and the UK. So we can either get out of the way or we wait for the car to hit us. And getting out of the way looks like investing in public health services, it looks like investing in peer support, it looks like investing in community, because that is how we will combat the very, very real rise of fascism that is happening across the West at the moment. We need to find ourselves with one another, we need to find ourselves in community, and we need to, I hate saying it, but we need to love each other again. We need to make sure that we're supporting each other no matter what, and having each other's backs no matter what, because if we don't do that, we are not going to have any progress. So I want to leave you with a bit of message of hope that things can get better and they will get better. The arc of history bends towards justice, and it's our job on the crossbench to make sure that it bends faster.
Senator Andrew Bragg, Liberal Senator for New South Wales.
Well, I'm up for re-election at this coming election, so this is your chance to finally get rid of me. What I would say, in all seriousness, is I've been really proud to work with this community over a long period of time and to stand up where I've been able to on marriage, in relation to the bills in Parliament on religious discrimination, and in relation to some of the other matters we've discussed tonight. And as I said, I take seriously what I said before about the mark of a good society being based on how it treats minority interests, and I think the status of this community says a lot about our country. I'm really proud to be Australian, and I think we've got a great country, and so we have to make sure that we can progress these issues, because it will be an adornment to our country if we're able to keep on making progress and working together. And I guess all I'd say is, I think we've got a great system, we've got a great country, and I don't think these issues are unsolvable. I think where we've worked together, in the past, Equality has done a great job, Anna and Tom and others over the years have done a great job. And where we can work together, I think we can seek to depoliticise, and I think we can actually solve a lot of these challenges. So I thank you for coming tonight and giving your time. I do think it's worth doing, and I think hopefully that fly leaves soon. And I think we can keep on working together. Sometimes you don't need to have everything canvassed publicly. Sometimes you can actually try and agree on things that seem very difficult behind the scenes. And certainly that was the case with a lot of the difficult issues to do with marriage almost 10 years ago now. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And Kate Thwaites, MP, Labor member for Jagga Jagga.
Thank you all for this evening. We have achieved some things in 3 years, and they've been important things, and I think particularly this health work and the input that has gone into that from community, the money that's gone towards that, the $10 million that we have just committed for primary health care, these are all things that will make a difference, and there is more to be done. In fact, just today, I think we announced some extra money as well for queer media, so that voices are being heard, and that goes to some of what we've talked about tonight as well, so that voices are heard, stories are told, and people feel represented in that space. But I think the biggest thing that we need to keep doing together, and why I do really want to thank you for having me here tonight and for holding this event, and for all of you bringing your voices, is we need to keep doing the work together. And for us as a Labor government, that has been a core part of how we've worked together with all of you on issues that I know that you have been fighting for and advocating on for decades and decades. And you will tell us that it's not job done, and it's not job done, and we know that. We want to keep doing the job with all of you, because the Australia that we believe in is inclusive. It is an Australia where everyone gets the healthcare that they deserve. It is an Australia where people are not discriminated against, where children are safe and feel secure, where we do not have debates that are based on hate or on trying to discriminate against people. So I would say thank you all for the work you have done with us for the last 3 years. Thank you for having tonight, and I really hope that we get the opportunity to keep doing the work with you, because it is so important.
thank you to our panelists. We had some great perspectives there. It was really great to hear from you all, and we look forward to seeing what does happen on May 3 and how you carry those words forward into this next term. Thank you, everybody in the audience, and thank you to everybody watching online around the country. What we've heard tonight isn't just political, it is personal for us, and it shapes who we are, how we live, how we feel safe, and whether we are seen. So I thank you all for joining us. I thank all of you for joining us, and get ready for May 3. And then May 18 for Eurovision as well.